Hello, I'm Bernice German, the Math Whisperer. I have a very important message for you about improving math achievement in the United States. We all delegate. There is just too much to do it all ourselves. But what if the person you have delegated to did not do a good job? Well, that is what has happened to math education with the Common Core standards. Fortunately, you do not need a PhD in math to see how flawed they are. There are over 40 million students in American public schools, and half of them are struggling in math. U.S. scores have been stagnant for over 30 years compared to our international competition. The achievement gaps between whites and blacks and whites and Hispanics is enormous and stagnant over 30 years. I have a solution that will raise the achievement of American students and close the achievement gap. I am now going to explain to you where the country went wrong. Let's go back to 1992. A multi-million-dollar Department of Education study comparing how the U.S. teaches math compared to the more successful countries revealed that U.S. curriculum is a mile wide and an inch deep. Fast forward to 2010. In 2010, the Common Core standards were released by a team of experts spending 8 years trying to fix the mile-wide, inch-deep problem. The math education hierarchy thinks the Common Core solved the problem, but you don't need a PhD in math or education to realize that it hasn't. U.S. scores continue their mediocrity and are actually declining compared to countries like Singapore. Let's look at an example, that of 5th grade. There are 23 standards for 5th grade, and some of them have 2 parts. They're 11 pages long. Here's a typical 5th grade standard. Actually, it is 1/2 of one standard, so 1/46 of the 5th grade Common Core standards. I'm going to read it to you. Interpret the product A over B times Q as A parts of a partition of Q into B equal parts, equivalently, as the result of a sequence of operations of A times Q divided by B. For example, use a visual fraction model to show 2/3 times 4 equals 8/3, and create a story context for this equation. Do the same with 2/3 times 4/5 equals 8/15. Now they get to the heart of it. In general, A over B times C over D equals A times C over B times D. Have your eyes glazed over already? Not surprising. This is ridiculously complicated. Welcome to the kind of teaching that the Common Core has spawned. Considering that the school year is 185 days, which translates into about 150 hours of class time, for 23 standards, there are about 6 hours per standard. So multiplication of fractions is 1/2 of one standard and gets 3 hours of class time. This is not enough time. Here's how we do it at Math Whisperer. We identified the critical building blocks for a solid foundation in math. We looked around the world for the best way to teach those critical building blocks. And guess what? 100 years of education research says we at Math Whisperer are doing things right. Plus, we collected data to measure the effectiveness of our approach and lessons, and typically saw 3 grade levels of growth in 6 months. Back to our 5th grade example. The Common Core presents this ridiculously complex, abstract way to look at multiplication of fractions. I'm going to show you how we at Math Whisperer teach the same thing. Now I'm going to show you how we teach multiplication of fractions with the Math Whisperer program. Multiplication of fractions depends on 2 critical building blocks: concept of multiplication and concept of fraction. We'll begin with concept of multiplication. Multiplication means groups of. So 2 times 3 means 2 groups of 3. Here's one group of 3. Here's a second group of 3, and the answer is 6. So 1/2 times 1/3 must mean 1/2 group of 1/3. That doesn't quite make sense, but this does. 1/2 times 1/3 means 1/2 of 1/3. Well, let's see what that is. Now I'll refer to concept of fraction. With fractions, everything starts with what is 1. So for this demonstration, I'm going to define this as 1. So I'll find 1/3 of it to begin with. Here's 1/3. Now I'll find 1/2 of 1/3, which is this. And this is 1/6. Back to what is 1. Exactly 6 of these cover the 1, so the answer is 1/6. Now let's find the formula that gets us that result. We've seen that 1/2 times 1/3 equals 1/6. Now the general form for multiplying fractions, a over b times c over d equals what? Well, in our example, a is 1. B is 2. C is 1, and D is 3. And the only way to get the answer of 1/6 is this way. A times C over B times D. And this is the general formula for multiplying fractions. And as you can see, this is not a meaningless formula, a rule that has to be memorized. It falls inevitably from concept of multiplication and concept of fraction. When all is said and done, students still need to be able to multiply fractions using this formula. Math Whisper lessons work this way. Our program begins with a state-of-the-art assessment for each student based on our critical building block methodology. The assessment takes 5 minutes. Each student then receives a customized program depending on what foundational gaps he or she has. Our proprietary system of workbooks and online lessons takes students through all sequential levels of understanding and execution. They are self-paced and are done independently, at school or at home. Our results have been analyzed by a number of researchers, including the Graduate Department of Education at the University of Denver. Our methodology produced typical student growth of 3 full grade levels in only 6 months of use. Our goal is to supplement the grade level Common Core curriculum. Our first targets are 5th through 10th graders who are behind grade level or otherwise struggling in math. Their growth on state or nationally recognized assessments will be measured by an independent University Department of Education. Our country needs its students to have a solid foundation in math that they can use to graduate high school, graduate college if that is their choice, and have any career they choose. My goal is to help students have math be their ally in leading the lives they want.